mean, yeah.
What I'd really like is if you did this sometime with like really obscure lines, just like random.
Yeah, I mean,
lines.
if I were to start to watch the show myself, I would do that. And I think at some point I do want to. I'm not going to start all the way from the start. I'm sorry.
Doctor Who is the 13th longest running show according to Screen Rant, with about 45 years under its belt, taking a break in 1989 before being picked back up by Russell T Davies in 2005, who at the time of writing this script is still a part of production. I knew of this show, but I wasn't really fully convinced to even give it a try until the Versus series on YouTube Death Battle put the Doctor against Rick Sanchez. And even then, it wasn't until a good friend of mine at university, who was in fact in my first attempt at a podcast, fully convinced me to watch the show. After watching the first few seasons, I discovered that because of hindsight, binge watching to a disgusting degree, and a lack of nostalgia, I had different outlooks on the popular and unpopular elements about the series, and then after I had fun discussing FNAF, I thought it would be fun to talk about something I knew nothing about, but this time actually enjoyed. And also throughout the entire thing, because I've seen a lot of people ranking the Doctor's companions and sonic screwdrivers, I won't mention it, but I'll make sure a graphic appears so you know where I think each of them rank competitively. And with that all out the way, let's journey through time and space and see everything beyond. Editing me just dropping in quickly to say I'm only covering New Who, because there's already nearly 200 episodes, and I wanted to catch up as quick as possible so I could start talking about the new stuff with my friend, and starting with Classic would have just taken me forever and a day, and even then, a lot of it I just researched Old Who, and New Who always seems to be talked about more. That's just my perspective. Anyway, hope you enjoy the rest of the video, and sorry about that. Just picture this for me.
It's 2005. All new Doctor Who episodes coming out. A new Doctor, new companion, new episodes, more adventures.
Christopher Eccleston comes onto the scene. Now, sadly, due to Russell T Davies and other management issues, he ended up leaving the show after 13 episodes, and I personally would have loved to see more versions of this Doctor, because unlike other Doctors in the future, he has probably the most consistent writing, more or less due to his lack of screen time. Though, in his season alone, he went through quite a lot of really interesting concepts, with a Paradox episode in Father's Day, an introduction to the recurring antagonists with their best episode in Daleks, to the funny game show parody that in fact got recreated in real life with the same questions with the actors of Doctor Who. Although the downside of that episode is we have the second worst companion in Adam Mitchell get left behind and forgotten. Yes, I brought him up so I could emphasise how much I dislike a different companion later on. Now, the best episode of this season by far is the Empty Child two-parter, and for reference I'm counting two parts as one because, yeah, it's one story, it's just treated as two parts for episodic reasons. In my head, they're the same thing. With a terrifying antagonist, a really fun new companion added to the mix in Captain Jack Harkness, the banter, the suspense, the twist keep my attention throughout all of it, with the Blackout Blitz adding extra tension to it. However, it does mean that the weakest episode, being The Unquiet Dead, is honestly the most forgotten about. There wasn't really anything too interesting for me. It kind of just happens and then I forgot about it. But I'd say the rest of its season was really good. Like, there's very few episodes that left me lacking. I'd say it is literally just The Unquiet Dead that I completely forgot about until I was looking through the episode list. Now, the 9th Doctor final 2-part episode was my introduction to regeneration, and he has one of the best ones, saying goodbye to his friend and becoming arguably the most iconic version in Doctor Who's history. Nine's journey was short and sweet, and it's sad that Chris left early, but I still love that we got him for his short stay as the Doctor I watched for the very first time. And now we get to arguably the most iconic portrayal of the Doctor to date. Now, one thing I want to just get off the bat straight, I think most of the regeneration episodes were the first episodes of a new version of the Doctor tend to be kind of weak as they're still trying to figure out how to write each version of them, and I think 10 has arguably the weakest as he's asleep for most of the time, so even then you still don't really get to know him and he's not really in it for most of the runtime, which I'm not a huge fan of. However, when he gets going, he gets going. Aside from his weak start, Tennant actually has a pretty good run for the most part, adding into Rose's development and giving Mickey and her mother more development too, finishing with a heartbreaking send-off in the season, well, his first season finale at least, never to be seen again. Luckily, due to most iconic companion's departure, we are introduced to the Christmas special and the 10th's best companion, Jonna Noble, played by Catherine Tate, who has amazing chemistry with Tennant, but doesn't stick around too long in this episode, which means we are shifted to Martha Jones, who, when I was watching it for the first time, I didn't really like Martha, and that's mainly due to the fact she felt like a carbon copy of Rose, having an infatuation with the Doctor, that being the reason she goes along, at least from the black and white elements. However, I felt like my opinion changed when it came to her season finale, when we got introduced to the Master, an amazing, extremely fun character to watch, kind of reminding me of Dio from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, having a sort of weird love-hate relationship between the protagonist and antagonist that are both insane and sane at the same time. I just love that dynamic that they had going on there. However, Martha's lack of depth of character at the start of the season wasn't the only thing I wasn't a fan of, as it introduced probably my least favourite thing about the whole of Doctor Who, and that is most of the two-parters tend to be really dragged out, and I'm not really a fan of most of the multi-part Doctor Who episodes, I should say, as it feels like the start and the end are paced perfectly, but that middle is just stretched out an extra 20 minutes either side, and there's a lot of moments where like you finish episode 1 and then you get 20 minutes into episode 2 and still nothing has happened, and it's like, well, what was the point in it being a two-parter? But that is honestly probably from the fact I just binge watched it all in a row. However, it did give us Tennant's final season, which admittedly had an absolute banger of a two-parter in the amazing Forest of the Dead, introducing a really fun new character in River Song, who I told my friend at the time of watching it that I really am sad she isn't in the show that much more, because she's clearly dead and they can't bring her back, so I would have loved to have seen more of her. However, as evidence against the two-part things, the Soltaran stratagem is like against like really boring antagonists that I have no interest in, that are kind of a joke to me, at least, so them being threatening was kind of boring. However, it did introduce us Wilfred Mott, Donna's granddad, who is one of my favourite characters. However, the other thing that happened in this final season is it started the obsession with this glorification of the 10th Doctor, as they continued to tease and bring back Rose, who even came back, and I didn't like that at all. She is locked behind another dimension, so the fact she can just suddenly come back and have a happy ending with her own Doctor ruins that heartbreaking ending of the Cybermen versus the Daleks. That was such an incredible finish. I was like, boom, so happy, but also it's a sad ending, but it's a happy sad ending because they're safe and she's with her family at least. But oh wait, no, she can just transcend dimensions now. It kind of really undoes that. However, also having Donna's memory removed of the whole of her time with the Doctor was such an interesting thing to do, because it was another one where it was like, it was a sad ending, but it was a good sad ending. And the fact that that's where we leave oh wait, we've got 5 more episodes to get through. Yeah, I think the 5 extra episodes after Donna's departure felt really dragged out. The only really 2 things that I liked about it was getting more Wilfred. Wilfred is one of my favourite side characters in Doctor Who, and also the regeneration in that finale was really good and really entertaining, and he has one of the best regeneration scenes of the whole series, in my opinion. However, those extra 5 episodes without Donna just felt like extra padding and didn't really fit. So just to briefly summarize what I thought was my favorite and least favorite episodes. Favorite is quite easy. Blink, I'm basic and boring, with my least favorite probably being the Human Nature 2-parter, as it was the first one where I was like, does it really need to be 2 parts? And it also started making me aware that 10 has 2 different writers to him. One episode he could be written by Moffat and be memeing about books in a library, and then the other episode he can be uber serious and masochistic, throwing people into an event horizon, freezing them in time to watch for all eternity, not doing anything, like really torturous things that I never really got from the Doctor at all. From every time someone spoke about him or everything like that just didn't feel like the Doctor to me. Granted, it could be a weakness of me binge watching it and stuff like that. Despite me finding these problems with how he was written, and him definitely ending up probably being my least favourite incarnation of the Doctor, at least of the numbered ones, I definitely think he does deserve his iconic status, and I really enjoyed watching it for the very first time. However, we now move on to what I think is the best Doctor. And now we get to the 11th Doctor, the youngest to play the Doctor as a recording, with Matt Smith. As I said, I do think he is the best of the New Who Doctors. I think he is most consistently written, he is the most entertaining, and 9 times out of 10 he can save you from a weaker feeling episode by just being there. However, most of the Doctors, they have like 1 or 2 episodes where they can't quite carry a weaker plot. He also has the best set of companions, starting off with the girl who waited, Amy Pond, and her boyfriend Rory Williams, though him slightly late. They would stick around for about 2 seasons. Honestly, the first of the 2 felt a lot weaker, with the sort of time crack vault thing honestly being really underwhelming, and in fact I forgot to write about I've completely forgot what it was and didn't write into my scripts, which I'm just now realising. Although it did let the 11th Doctor come across with more fun-loving and passive than the other ones, more how he was described to me before watching the show, compared to how 9 and 10 were a lot more aggressive feeling in their portrayals. That being said, the second of 11 seasons give us back River Song and her whole seasonal arc about the death of the Doctor. Does she take a part in it? These creatures that you instantly forget about when you look away. God, it was so interesting, and it was the most engaged I felt when watching a full season. I couldn't wait to find out what the mystery was, trying so hard to not ask my mate what actually happens, but instead I stuck it out, and it's a paradoxical story, and they are some of my favourites across all of time travel stories. It was done so well and so interestingly. Finishing Riversong's character arc. The only really negative is there is a weak 2-part story in the middle that has like bad pacing, and it definitely could have been 1 episode. That being said, it then carries over into the 3rd and final season for Matt Smith, as we say goodbye to Amy and Rory about halfway through, who I'd say they have the best chemistry with their respective Doctor yet to be beaten. All of this wrapped in an amazing angel story, as we say goodbye to them and watch them die in the past. However, it's not long until we're introduced to the impossible girl, Clara Oswald. In my opinion, best companion, as she has about half the season with 11. I think she gets on a lot better with 12, and she's a lot more interesting there. She is a part of the 50th anniversary episode, which definitely lived up to the hype. The dynamic of 11 and 10 and the War Doctor bouncing off of each other with a threat looming over them, it was probably one of the best episodes of the entire franchise. It was so good. However, one thing I will say is there being kind of like 2 plot points going on. Ironically, coming from me, it really should have been a 2-parter, because you've got the Zygon invasion and then you've got the Saving Gallifrey plot lines, which kind of intersect but butt heads with each other, leaving one of them feeling more undeserved. However, does in fact get followed up in 12's era later on. Sadly, there is one thing that this special does. It has Billie Piper come back, the actress who played Rose Tyler, but in this situation, as she is not directly Rose Tyler, I'm more fine with it. I do want to mention it's really sad that the 9th Doctor never got shown on screen at all, because obviously Christopher Eccleston still kind of has bad blood with Russell T Davies about what happened behind the scenes. Even if it was just the War Doctor regenerating into the 9th, that would have been amazing to see, but I understand is not possible. However, we do get the tease of the 12th Doctor, as when saving Gallifrey, someone states all 13 of the Doctors are saving Gallifrey, and that moment is just so good. With the Day of the Doctor following this up, leading into 11's regeneration, it being heartfelt goodbye to Clara, who doesn't feel like an Amy Pond sequel like Martha does to Rose, but most of this is followed up in 12. Matt Smith has definitely got the best era of Doctor Who, and it always kept me hooked, even during the weaker elements of his seasons, and it was definitely sad to say goodbye to the Fez and Fishfinger loving Doctor. Now, let me get this out of the way. Peter Capaldi's my favourite Doctor. I think, as I said, objectively, Matt Smith is a better Doctor, but I just prefer Peter Capaldi. It's the fact that he is, in my opinion, the most sarcastic and rudest version of the Doctor. He gets to start off his journey with the best companion in Clara, and her having like a sort of mini conflict with the regeneration on the phone, being teased by 11's regeneration process. This is just my favourite Doctor. I don't care, fight me. When she started off as a companion, you could argue that she was like a weaker version of Amy, but I don't agree, and that's mainly because she gets to spend most of her time with this Doctor, and their relationship is summed up simply by, "This is Clara, she is my carer, she cares for me, so I don't have to," which is so funny and sums up 12's character progression in such a really funny way. I had such a fun time with 12, even in the weaker episodes. I feel like similarly to 11, he kind of carried the episode anyway, until his spotlight is forced to be shared with the Master's second incarnation, Missy, who is such a joy, and I'd say is the best form of the Master in my opinion, who uses the Cybermen in a new, unique way, unlike what they do with the Daleks, but we'll get to that. 12's weakest point does reveal its ugly head in his second season. In my second most controversial opinion behind Tennant being weak, Heaven Sent doesn't work for me. Now, put down the pitchforks, please. I'd like to explain why. Now, don't forget, I was binge watching this, so the fact that ruined 2-parters should have given it away, and the fact that this is a 3-parter with Clara's death coming out of nowhere and shoved into this makes it feel so underwhelming. I think if it was like 2 episodes instead of 3, it might have worked better. I don't know, I just don't vibe with Heaven Sent. I like the idea though, that is one thing I will say. Him spending about 4 billion years in the dial loop thing twist is like shocking, depressing, really interesting to think about. It's just portrayed as a kind of boring little chapter in an already boring 3-parter. I just don't vibe with it at all. Coming off of this kind of underwhelming 3-parter, we get The Husbands of River Song, the final episode with River Song to date, and the conclusion of her character, sending her back to that library where she will die. It does mean that the line in that 2-parter way back in 10-0 that David Tennant looked noticeably older, like he looks like an older version of the Doctor, when Peter Capaldi looks older than Tennant was when he was the Doctor, plus also Tennant will even return to be the 14th Doctor, so really I would have liked to see River Song interact with the 14th Doctor just to make that line make a little bit more sense, but still. This episode was phenomenal. I really love it, and not just because of Greg Davis. People who know me and know I like Greg Davis from Taskmaster. I think he's the best thing about The Inbetweeners, and I didn't like The Inbetweeners, but I like Greg Davis. The final season for the 12th Doctor with Bill was okay. I kind of just didn't really care for Bill, although her fate at the end is sad and shocking, which lets us have 2 incarnations of the Master talking to each other, that being a lot of fun, as you can imagine. But having 12 not want to regenerate in his final special, and then learning that regeneration is just what he needs to do, he needs to let go of the past and just accept the future, it was done so well. Even getting to see past versions of the Doctor again that aren't necessarily straight up just the Doctor meeting a past Doctor, it was done in an incredible way, and it was beautiful. His final speech just before his regeneration was almost perfect. I do think it was going on a bit too long, but is definitely an end to a great run, cementing himself as my favourite Doctor. He's also the only Doctor to play guitar, and I play guitar as well. Jodie Whittaker. This one's an interesting one for me, as it is my mate's favourite version of the Doctor, but it's also the one I saw got the most criticism online before I started watching Doctor Who, and I thought, I'm definitely going in with a blank slate. I do not care, and I think it's best to start off with the fact I don't think she's badly written. I think she has the worst companions though, as she has the worst of all time, with the other 3 kind of being hit or miss sometimes. The Doctor herself though is a welcoming, caring take on the Doctor, which is what I expected the show to be in, as I mentioned back in 11's segment. I expected the Doctor to be a kind, compassionate one, and this is 13 to a T, adopting the words that 12 said before he regenerated, whilst also sort of having that sarcastic snark that 9 tended to have every now and again. Her connection to the companions, treating them as family, just works so well, but damn it, I don't like Ryan at all. And he's the only reason why I included Adam way back when talking about 9's companions. Like, I really don't like Ryan at all. His clearly modern slang dialogue, his unwilling to change and grow as a person got on my nerves, as it happened so much to the point anytime he did develop, he got reset back to normal until he finally left the Doctor's companionship. And that leads into Bradley Welsh, and I keep forgetting the name of his character because a lot of the time it is just Bradley Welsh being Bradley Welsh, because his comedic beats don't really work for me. However, his emotional ones do work, like him talking about how he is trying to just be that father figure for Ryan, and then Ryan just chooses to undermine all of his attempts at emotion in the worst way possible. I don't like Ryan. Yaz and Dan, honestly, I don't really mind either of them. I think they're both fine. The relationship between Yaz and the Doctor, again, I don't disagree with it. I just think it feels slightly forced, at least for me, because She clearly doesn't really have many emotional feelings during the first 2 seasons of 13's run, but then in the last one it's like, oh, she loves the Doctor, and that's like, okay, sure. I don't mean to be continually negative towards 13's era, however, I think the Fugitive Doctor is the weakest version of the Doctor, period. I don't like the Fugitive Doctor at all. It feels like they exist to justify the Timeless Child thing, which I'm not against. I think the Timeless Child thing's really interesting. I don't care for the fact it retcons, like, one of my favourite TV shows growing up got retconned hard in areas that way worse than the Timeless Child, so I'm much more accepting of the Timeless Child. However, the Fugitive Doctor, I don't like the Fugitive Doctor at all, because her personality, her portrayal, just everything about her just doesn't work for me in any way at all. The last small bit of criticism I have for Jodie's era is it does have the weakest version of the Master, excluding the Rasputin dance scene, which makes it feel much closer to his older versions and less like a cheesy Bond villain like he was in his first introductory episode. Speaking of the power of the Doctor, it is a phenomenal conclusion. Having the previous companions from the classic era come back was really exciting because I knew nothing about them. I did a bit of research, and it was really interesting to see them post adventures with the Doctor, leaving Yaz behind to then go to a companion support group that Graham had was such a beautiful thing, as the best thing about 13 was her relationship with her companions and how she treated them close like a family. So having one of the ones she left behind start up a meeting was beautiful, and even apparently there was a laptop on the table that was rumoured to be Rose Tyler's mum from the other dimension. I'm glad that wasn't in the episode, and they just forgot about Martha. Could have been Martha. Probably didn't have access to her actor at the time, but still, it being a heartful, warm ending to the most full of love Doctor there is was just perfect as she tagged in the next incarnation. Tennant. They can't leave you alone, can they? So yes, David Tennant returns as the 14th Doctor. However, this time round he only gets 3 episodes, all technically considered specials, and I love 2. I think the other one is kind of mid, with 1 having quite a big plot hole. Starting off with said plot hole, the reason for how Donna doesn't die from regaining her memories being that the Time Lord energy she shared with her daughter was a really fun way of explaining it. However, not getting too political with it, really did not need to bring in the fact the Doctor was a man, didn't understand it, especially as the literal previous version of the Doctor was a woman, and even then gender probably doesn't mean much to Time Lords, and he's not even a Time Lord, so that just kind of felt like a bit too forced in my opinion. But I'm not gonna get too upset with it. It's not the be all end all, because the idea on paper was actually really good. I'm just gonna skip over the second special as it's kind of whatever and doesn't really match into much. It just kind of happened. So when it comes to the third one, we get a really nice reintroduction I should say, to Wilfred in his one scene, as I'm gutted to find out that his actor died before getting to do more scenes, and with him being such a lovely character, reminding me much of my own granddad, I love to watch him and I would love to see him more. May he rest in peace. So continuing on with the episode itself, God, the Toymaker is my favourite antagonist of the New Who at all, like reoccurring and otherwise. Neil Patrick Harris has such a fun take on the character, as I'm aware he appears in Classic Who, but I have no idea what he's like then. In this, he very much reminds me of Bill Cipher from Gravity Falls, him being this sort of chaotic god that doesn't care and just goes around dancing on people just to go and just do whatever he wants, turning everything into a game is just so much fun. It all culminating in the bi-generation, which is such an interesting idea that works on paper but also doesn't, the only way I see it fully working for me is if somehow 14 remerged into 15 to make the sort of therapy line that 15 drops make more sense. But as I'm writing this before the 15th Doctor's finale has come out, I have no idea if this will happen. But even then, letting a version of the Doctor, excluding the alternate version that gets sent to Rose in that whole situation, have a happy life, able to settle down and finally just be at peace with the world that he is trying to save so much, is quite a nice short mini circle arc thing that concludes his, as we move on to more chaotic journeys with a new Doctor. And at last we have reached Ncuti Gatwa, the 15th Doctor and the most recent one to date as of recording. I remember the backlash coming out on TikTok quite a bit surrounding his first few episodes, and a lot of people weren't happy with it, especially as it was run by Disney. So I was really excited to see what the fuss was all about. Now, the first episode is a lot of fun. It focuses on introducing the new Doctor more than the previous special, and it also introduces the new companion Ruby Sunday, who is such a fun companion and definitely up there as one of the best, setting up her origin that didn't get delivered on very well. Yay, go Disney, their Marvel writing style has rubbed off on something else. But moving on to the first official episode of the season, Space Babies. It is stupid, it is childish, but I thought it was fine. I don't know what's wrong with me. I thought it fit into Doctor Who, and I thought it was honestly fine. However, if anybody says anything bad about the second episode, The Devil's Cord, I will find you. This is done so well, continuing off of Giggle, sets up foreshadowing Fight Against Gods, which becomes a running theme throughout all of Ncuti's era. And I love films and TV shows that have really good sound in them. There's a reason why Baby Driver is my favourite film of all time, and that is just blatantly because the sound is so beautiful. So the fact this episode runs wild with it is so much fun, and it is one of my favourite ones of the entire show quite easily because of that. Now, there's a few more episodic shenanigans as the season goes on. They're all relatively enjoyable until the two-part finale comes around, and it's frankly got a kind of dumb twist for the sake of a twist, really, and makes Ruby feel less important with no twist. It's a mess. It's still an enjoyable watch, don't get me wrong, as Ruby is one of the more enjoyable companions to watch, and 15 is a fun Doctor, so it wasn't completely awful, but yeah, it left a lot to be desired. Now, the second season was a lot harder. At this point, I started to procrastinate writing this script, especially after I watched the Lux episode, which was bigged up as one of the best episodes of it, and it felt a real big letdown to me. I loved Lux still, it's still a really good episode, don't get me wrong. I just needed more from the antagonist of that episode, and it's the combination of 2D and live action was amazing, and I wish they pushed that more. Instead, I could do without the Whovian insert, not being a full Whovian from the start, I guess. I kind of felt like it was, oh, this is what you sound like, and this is when you complain when stuff doesn't go right, this is what... I don't know, it just didn't sit right with me. It felt like it was Doctor Who making fun of fans, at least from my perspective. Other people have said they really enjoyed it, so, but for me, I was just like, eh. Most of the rest of season 2 is kind of that just same kind of alright, and before I go into the finale of season 2, this is your final main spoiler warning for the finale of Doctor Who up until the end of Ncuti Gatwa's era. Alright, moving on. Two-parter does work quite well, with these like bone kaijus focusing on a child's life was quite interesting. That being the reason the Doctor regenerates felt quite lame. Seeing Jodie Whittaker was such a joy, it was so much fun. Especially making fun of Tennant coming back twice already was very, very well deserved, as he doesn't need to come back for a while now. However, how he regenerates does leave a sour taste in my mouth, as I said, it feels very undeserved, and it's quite clear that Ncuti was leaving earlier than planned, so his regeneration kind of does come out of nowhere. And then there's also the nostalgia baiting that they seem to be prevalent with doing, as Pilly Piper, aka Rose Tyler's actor, is the new 16th Doctor. Not a huge fan of that, but you know what? I can't wait to see what they do with it. If they do something interesting with it, I'm fine. I'm just sick of the nostalgia baiting. Now, to sum it up, basically, 15 was a fun Doctor. He was allowed to be the Doctor for about 20% of his episodes overall, which ones where he was either put to the side and has someone else take the foreground, or he was locked in one place, not really allowing him to run around coming up with creative solutions like the mine one. So that's something that made me feel a bit sad, but it's not the end of the world because he was still really entertaining, and I'm excited to see what they do next. Finally, here we are, page 8 of my script. We are finally caught up with this fabulous show. Honestly, I highly recommend this show to people, especially if you love like sci-fi, time travel. Just give it a go. It is so much fun, and me knowing practically nothing going into it, I had a blast watching it. Yeah, it's a lot of episodes and some aren't greater than others, but honestly, overall, it is phenomenal, and I'm so glad I went through this all because now I have more conversation topics at university. But before I go, I just wanted to say it was fantastic. I don't want to go, but we are all different people throughout our lives, and that's okay. Just remember to never be cruel, never be cowardly. And that's the sad thing. We all want to know what happens next, but here we go. It's been an absolute joy.